Welcome to the How to Start a podcast. Today I'm joined by my friend, colleague, and fellow podcaster, C. Webster Marsh. Hey, Webster, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
And I'm just going to give a brief intro here to, if anyone's listening to this, just to tell you how Webster and I came to know each other. During the pandemic, we were bored. And so my business partner and I, who are hosting another podcast called Get a Grip on Lighting and a couple of the shows that we do here at the studio, and we were bored. And we're like, well, you know what? We hate talking about lighting controls, and there's probably people out there that are more interested and know a lot more about the subject than us. I wonder if we could do a couple shows on Get a Grip on Lighting. And so I called our friend Tom Butters from the Lighting
hmm
Agora, and I said, hey Tom, do you know anybody that might want to do a series on Get a Grip on lighting controls? And he introduced you and I to that,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah, I
how we
remember
became,
that. Yeah.
yeah, that's how we came to know each other. And then you guys did such a great job with your first guest, which was Ron Kuzmar. And the show was so good. And I loved Ron so much that I said, you guys should start your own show. You should do 6 or whatever of these and do a series.
hmm
And you did it. And Ron was the co-host of that. And then after that, the numbers were so good and people were listening. They were listening to what you guys were talking about. So I went to the board of NAILed and I asked them if we could start the Lighting Controls podcast with you guys. And they told me that, we want a bit of an investment from the hosts as well. And so everybody stepped up together. We put together a plan. And
hmm
now, how many episodes do you have, Webster?
We're nearing 70 now.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been a crazy ride. I mean, and I think Ron was the one who just kind of felt like he stepped on an escalator and just kept going because, like you said, he was just a guest to start, and he thought, okay, I'm gonna have 15, 30 minutes of talk, and then that'll be it, and I'll never hear of this again. And then suddenly it was, hey, do you want to be the co-host of this show that I'm working on? And suddenly he was like, yeah, this is great. And so it's just been a really amazing ride and such an emergent process, and both of us are super grateful for all the support that we've received on this. For a long time I'd been somebody who was a holder of the banner of lighting controls but didn't really have a platform, and then suddenly NAILed came forward and said, hey, here's a platform, you want to step up on it? And it was an amazing opportunity that I couldn't let down. And again, like you said, it was just through all this natural organic networking that it kind of transpired to the way that it was. But it's really, we've had some amazing guests on the show. We've had some fantastic feedback from the audience. We even have smaller episodes where we go back and make some modifications of statements we've made just to clarify information, because lighting controls are changing so consistently right now and so quickly that it's hard to even the experts will stuff their foot in their mouth at times. And it's good to just make sure that we have the right information out there. And it seems like everybody's really just eating it up, which is great, because that's the point. We want to just talk about lighting controls. That's it. We don't have a hidden agenda or anything like that. It's literally just conversations, and it burdened out of the conversation series. That was the title of what it was originally, but now it being its own official podcast, we've just kept that mentality forward of just having conversations with people.
Authenticity is such an important part of the podcast movement. Never mind lighting controls or lighting.
Right.
I think people are attracted to the authenticity. I can see you wearing your own merch. I know that Ron, when we said we were going to do merch, he nearly went to the moon. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And I mean, the merch is not like an income driver. It's
No.
literally just like a gift to our regular guests. Steve Mesh, we're gonna get him a polo when he's on next, because he's been on so many times. And my wife was wearing the T-shirt with my face on it the other day, and it was just sort of like, okay, this is incredibly adorable, and at the same time, it doesn't. It's more of just like the support for the podcast than it is anything else.
Craig DeLuey and the Lighting Controls Association have been such a great help, just lending their credibility and, helping us out with the marketing and finding guests. So my hat's off to Craig DeLuey on this one as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, they've been an incredible partner in this, and could not be where we are without their support for sure, as well as with Nailed. I mean, having the support of these two groups really helps bolster our position with this information, because the LCA will post our episodes on their website and in their newsletters. Nailed will do the same thing, and it just helps raise awareness of the podcast, and part of being a grassroots movement in a very niche marketplace. It really is word of mouth. That's how you get the listeners. It's not about, having a big billboard on the side of a highway saying the Lighting Controls podcast. Nobody's going to tune into that. It's more of like, oh, I didn't know there was a Lighting Controls podcast.
Exactly.
Let me take a listen.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, it's funny because a lot of people, when they're thinking about this space, they're thinking in terms of like, I need millions of views. And it's like,
right.
You know what? If you're actually a subject matter expert in something and you're curious and you want to learn more and you're respectful and you understand that this is a professional environment where people are, we're going to have serious, authentic conversations. But there's no politics, or, the manners are on the highest level. Everybody's at their highest level of manners. And when it comes to Nailed, I mean, my hat's off just to all the guys on the board there. They've taken a lot of chances. You have to hand it to them.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's the thing, is like, when you start a podcast, it's a passion project. It is not a revenue generator. Maybe one day I'll be able to cash those checks and ride easy, but this is not my bread and butter for income. This is like maybe a cup of coffee every day I get covered. But
Sure.
As far as, if you're going into podcasting for the purpose of just making tons of money, you have so many better options for that. And it does take a bit of an investment of time and money to really get to a place where it is generating income. I mean, Ron and I also took a risk, and we invested in this. It was investing in ourselves, but it's paid back. We're actually at critical mass at this point. So we've returned all of the invested money that we've put in, and it's, over a year and a half at this point. So I would say that's a pretty good return, but it was hard work. It was not easy.
Need to check with an expert before you start recording? Get a Grip Studios offers consultation services. Visit getagripstudios.com for more.
Yeah. Well, let me throw you maybe you can think about it in a slightly different way. So you have a revenue generating podcast, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So most podcasts, you have almost 70 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just throw some wild numbers out there. So most good podcast ideas never become podcasts.
Right. Yeah.
And then most podcasts, most good ideas of podcasts that become podcasts have single-digit numbers of episodes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And then of that, the remaining that are out there, most of them are sort of, I don't want to say it, but, they're doing it for public relations. They're paying for public relations. You understand what I mean? Like, they're paying to produce their own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so this puts you like in the professional leagues, Webster.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, that's I hadn't put it that way, but yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, there are so many podcasts out there that are being supported by their own content creators, and that's it. And as a result, they don't reach as broad an audience, because I would say that leveraging your sponsorships actually helps bolster your listeners, because of the fact that you have multi-purposed marketing. It's not just you posting your episodes online anymore. Your sponsors are also posting your episodes online, and they're reaching out to their listeners of their content, of any kind of content. So it really does benefit to have sponsorship and partnerships and relationships with other groups, so that you can dual purpose that. And additionally, the sponsorships work both ways. We raise awareness of our sponsors to our listeners who aren't familiar with them. One of our sponsors, MW Connect, just rebranded, and having us help that rebranding process and telling our listeners, hey, by the way, you used to know them as McWong, but they're now MW Connect. I can only imagine how helpful that's been to their cause to rebrand.
And they've been McWong. I think Margaret started it. Margaret Wong, a great supporter of the show. I love you, Margaret.
Absolutely.
I love you.
Yeah.
Anytime you want to come on any show that I produce, the door is wide open. Okay, so we love you, Margaret. You're the best. But I think they were McWong for 40 years or a long time.
Yeah, they just celebrated their 40-year anniversary. And
Wow.
so, 40 years of being McWong and then suddenly flipping that switch and going over to MW Connect, that's a heavy lift. And so the more we can do to support them in that effort, the better. It's a two-way street. We're supporting each other in efforts to raise awareness, but also just in lighting controls in general. I mean, our missions are very similar with McWong's in the sense of that we just want to get people to be more accepting of lighting controls and understand them better, because there's so much poor information out there when it comes to lighting controls.
You mean MW Connect? Because you said McWong. Yeah.
Oh no! See, it's so hard. It's so hard to.
But but this is an excellent publicity strategy for them.
Yes.
Because even in this conversation, like, we didn't plan to talk about a McWong, MW Connect, but now it's being imprinted in my brain. Oh yes, yeah. That, even right now between you and I, on a show that might never see the light of the internet, but that connection is happening again. A lot of people, we talked about a little bit about, and a lot of respect I have for people that produce their own podcasts and do the recording and do all the work, posting it to the website, cutting into social media clips, loading them onto social media. To promote the show and getting the sponsors booked in and the guests booked in and having everybody come together in one place from different time zones around the world and making sure the right sponsors on there and all that sort of stuff that happens in the background. I think people massively underestimate how much work that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think furthermore, not just the cost of money, like the actual monetary cost of that, but the time required. Each show, Ron and I dedicate at minimum an hour to that episode so that we can record the time. And if the guest goes longer than we anticipated, that's fine. Or if things happen where our technology isn't working, our microphone stops working or something like that, we have some buffer. And coordination with the producers to make sure that we're scheduled for the right guests, identifying the right guests to have in the shows, and additional stuff that we're doing alongside all of that. Ron and I started a council through NAILED to raise awareness of lighting control startup and integration. And so there's all this other stuff that we're doing alongside this podcast that just feeds into this passion that we have. But it's the cost of time is an investment and something that people need to consider if they are already stretched for time. Maybe podcasting is not the right maneuver there because you need to dedicate. And we have times where we have to cancel episodes and it's a bummer, but people who are our guests, their time is just as valuable and we need to be respectful of that. So we try not to cancel if we can avoid it, but if we have to, we're very respectful. I'm sorry, let's find a better time. And we make sure that we don't cancel on them again. It's basically like once we cancel, that guest needs to be treated much more differently because we've already screwed up respecting their time.
Yeah, and think about it. Like, they're willing to have whoever they are, whether they're a manufacturer, a subject matter expert, someone that sells lighting controls in the field. They're taking time out of their day to contribute to the movement. Like, this is like people going on being a guest on the Lighting Controls podcast, Restoring Darkness podcast, Get a Grip, whatever it is. These people are joining. This is their contribution to the movement. You know what I'm saying? Is saying, hey, I'm willing to weigh in here. I'm vulnerable. I'm willing to be recorded. You know what I mean with what I'm going to say. And I've had 20 years in the business, and this is my take on the whole situation. They're taking a risk. My hat's off to all the guests on your show and all
Oh,
the guests.
100%. No, I mean, our guests, and I'm sure you would say the same, are just wonderful. And we really appreciate all the time that they've spent working with us, getting their voices heard. It is great marketing for them, but at the same time, I would agree, they're taking a risk. They're putting their opinion out there into the ether and hoping that it's treated with respect. And that's one of the things that Ron and I really do our best to try to do, is foster this collegial environment in our podcast of just, tell us your story. No judgment. This world has a lot of issues with it, for sure. But at the same time, everybody's imperfect. Everybody has flaws. Everybody has challenges to overcome. And that's how we get better, is when we look at our challenges with an objective view and just think through, okay, what would make things better in the future? Not let's go back and beat up on everybody who did us wrong in the past, but let's look forward and say, okay, one of my favorite questions to ask on the show is, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything about our industry, what would you change? And people take some real time to consider that, because it's, there is so much that we could do to improve. But if you only had to choose one thing, what would it be? That really strikes at the heart of what people want to talk about. And so, again, just thinking forward into the future, what do we want to do? How do we want to change the world for the better?
I have I don't know which direction to go here first. Both of them are kind of exciting questions for you guys, because it's just watching you guys has been fun from the outside. Let me talk about this first. I have a note here for the second thing. So the pilot series, the 6 episodes, like the 5-6 episodes you guys did on Get a Grip on Lighting. You came in, on your own, and then Ron's joining you. By the 6th episode, did you feel like you had to do it, or was it like, were you exhausted? What was the emotions like when you're saying, we should do this, we should strike out on the Lighting Controls podcast? What was that like?
I was so thrilled at that point. It was like every single episode I came in like, oh, I get to talk to this person now? That's awesome. Like, I love talking about lighting controls, and that is something that I hope is obvious to anybody who has talked to me in person or on the podcast. Like, I just love talking about lighting controls. And so whenever I meet somebody new who is like, I don't know if I have anything to say on the show, it's like, no, you do. I would love to have you on the show. And every time somebody's like, what are we going to talk about? And then we have them on the show. By the end of the episode, they're like, holy, like, that time just flew right by. Because there is so much to talk about. There's so much that you can we could talk for hours and hours and hours on the subject. And so when we got to the 6th episode, I was like, I'm not ready to throw my hat in. Like, I don't want this to end. I want this to keep going. I want to keep talking to people and hearing their stories. And so it is not a chore. It is always an exciting opportunity to hear a new perspective when it comes to this industry that I care so much about, and a subject that I care so much about. And, I learn stuff all the time. And, as much as I would love to, have a giant textbook on lighting controls and just flip through the pages, this also is its own great learning environment for me, where I can start piecing things together and hearing, okay, oh, interesting. So this is what it's like in California. This is what it's like in DC. This is what it's like in Texas. And also across the pond with Europe, we're getting more and more European listeners and even guests on the show, and that's exciting. We just had a guest on about residential lighting, which is its own entire industry within the industry.
Sure.
And so there's just so much to learn about, and I'm just so humbled and thrilled by every single time I get to step in and interview somebody.
Yeah, if you think you're hot shit, you start a podcast. You know what I mean? Because like what happens really quickly is, if you're good at it, is actually you realize that there's more to learn actually, and we're just getting started. Like once you start talking to experts on a regular basis, It's just like every you become more, and humility is the natural response in this
Right.
case, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I guess there are podcasters out there who go in like a bull in a china shop and try to force their agenda down people's throats, but those tend to get fucked pretty quickly, and people
mm,
get really uncomfortable with those kinds of hosts because of the fact that there's no room for an alternative opinion, in which case the guest doesn't have much to say.
that is such an amazing point. Like we've from the beginning, if there's one thing we always connected on, we had our run-ins. We had our run-ins over the
Yes,
process of the creative
totally.
process was intense. Like, let's put it
Yeah.
that way, right? But the one thing we always had, and I think I knew about you from the beginning, and I think that you knew about me, was that we have to be this. We have to go in this direction because
Mm-hmm.
you know why do we want to hurt people? Like
Right.
when you see these whatever they were, muck throwing shows,
Yeah.
and it's awful. You're watching
Right.
this stuff, and one guy's screaming at the other guy and not listening and not answering the question, and the other guy's, or they're all focused on this one person we all hate. This one person
Right.
we all hate is this person, don't you know? And I'm so glad that there's this world where we can actually solve
Mm.
problems in.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that is worth considering is what's your audience doing while listening? They're
Mm,
not just sitting at a computer, like furiously scribbling notes, listening to you talk. They're probably exercising. They're probably getting ready for work on a
totally.
commute. They're in a headspace where they don't want to be in this adversarial, like, fight or
No.
flight mentality. They just want to get warmed up or relax, or have something in the background while they're exercising. Like, this is a different environment entirely than if I were going to turn on to WWE or something like that and have that playing in the background. Like, I don't, but
WWE.
yeah.
He loves professional wrestling. I prefer the UFC. I prefer the real
Yeah.
thing. But I wanted to ask you, have you had the experience of one of your colleagues that enjoys the show from time to time coming up to you that you don't know? Have you had that experience yet?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, that was such a surreal experience. In fact, one of a good colleague of mine now, who's on the council that Ron and I started, his name's Ben. He walked up to me at Light Fair a few years ago and was like, "You're on the Lighting Controls podcast, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." And we just started chatting, and those kinds of connections are so special because I feel so surreal in that moment. It's like, I guess people would say it's celebrity dumb, but at the same time, it's like I don't want to get into that headspace of like, oh yeah, I'm hot shit now.
No.
Like, it's more of just like, yeah, like, how did you like make that connection? How did you, like, were you looking for me, or did you just spot me out of a crowd? And sometimes people will be like, yeah, I've been like trying to find you for like months now. And it's like, whoa, like, okay, my contact information is out there. Like, please reach out. Like, I'm not trying to like hold people at bay. But I would say those connections just mean so much to me because of the fact that they also have the same passion and interest. And so they've been listening to the podcast for so long because they share the same interests that I do. And so they give me such interesting feedback on the show. Like, oh, you don't really talk a lot about this. Have you thought about doing more on that? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, do you know any good people who would be a subject matter expert on that? And so those create nice organic connections and guest opportunities. At the same time, I think what's really funny is people who watch versus listen. They'll be like, I recognize that voice, or it's so weird to hear you in person because I've been listening to you for so long, and it's just such a, again, it's just a humbling experience because these are the people that help me reach the acclaim that I'm reaching, and the awareness that I'm bringing to these people means so much to me, because they're the target audience. They're the people that I want to be talking to on a regular basis. So to have them just say these things, it really warms my heart.
We always say on Get a Grip on Lighting, we don't have listeners or anything like that. We just have colleagues that don't do podcasts.
I love that. Yeah, I remember you actually, one of your first pep talks to Ron and I, you said that to us, and yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, and just treating them with that level of reverence as well, because of the fact that, if they have feedback and they reach out and share it, that meant that they took the time out of their day to tell me something about the show, which meant that I hit on something really important to them, and that deserves to be acknowledged. That's why whenever we get listener feedback, we take it very seriously. We want to make sure that people have that opportunity to say, this is my thought.
It's a small community, and I wanted to ask you about the council.
Sure.
Remind me of the name of it again before I ask the question.
So it's the Council on Lighting Controls Startup and Integration.
Yeah. And how many people have joined you guys?
We're at about 14 members now.
That's a good number.
Yeah, and we're growing. We're trying to be slow but deliberate with our growth. And it does seem like we're going to actually be getting a good number of more members in the near future, because of the fact that we found out about another grassroots effort on the same exact purpose, called the Association of Lighting Controls Technicians. And so we're working together to try and collaborate and create synergy, because they also saw the need that we saw, which was the need for more information and standardization regarding technicians in the field when they're doing startup integrations or any kind of work. Really, there really is not a standard or a requirement. There's no official training out there, and every manufacturer is kind of on their own right now. So we want to work together to create a unified front, so that people can easily find technicians, easily identify adequate labor to do the work that needs to be done on projects, because it varies so widely, and to ensure that education is consistent among these different people. So that's really the effort that we're trying to pool our resources together to create. And so a lot of the members of the council are avid listeners of the podcast, which is amazing and hilarious at the same time. But they're all dedicated, passionate people who just want to see improvement in our industry, because we see that there's this weak link, and part of that weak link results in dissatisfied ownership, which is really one of the core issues with lighting controls right now, is that ownership consistently have these bad experiences for one reason or another. And we have identified that labor, when it comes to starting the systems up, getting it going, getting it integrated, that is one of the issues.
That is a social media clip right there, Scott. Just letting you know.
Turn your plans into a pilot. Visit getagripstudios.com or call 416-492-5835 for more information.
I'm like, people that would know who played third base on the Detroit Tigers in 1955, because they're just so into baseball. You know what I mean? Or who the third line center on the 1967 Leafs was. These kind of guys, they're out there just into it. They love it, right? They love hockey. They love baseball. You love lighting controls, right?
Yes.
People get passionate about weird things, right?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm thinking of a conversation I had with somebody who was unrelated to my industry, and he was like, wow, like, I know there's always like some weird niche for everything, because like I used to collect these like Disney glasses with like Goofy and Cinderella, and like I found out that there was this like big convention that happened every year for just collectors of these glasses.
Mm.
And it's just like, that is the image that comes to mind whenever somebody's like, yeah, this is such a niche. And it's like, yep. This, like, I am so just like lighting controls focused, and I'm owning it, and that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, people, like I said, you got the classes. One time, I happened to walk into, I can't remember the guy's name. I'm losing the name. Anyway, some singer from the 1920s, a convention, this guy. And people would go and sing his songs, and there was like 150 people there. It's crazy. Have you? I'm a bit of a dork when it comes to economics. I love reading. I read The Economist for years and years and years, cover to cover, and I'd say, "Don't you see how fascinating this is?" And people would give me the squirreliest looks. Okay, but anyway, I learned a lot about the German economy, and one of the things that is super popular in Germany are these really high-level trade associations. Now, one thing that people don't understand is that until very recently, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Germany was the world's largest exporter. So it exported more in terms of dollar value than China. Up to and this is a country of 80 million versus a country of 1.7 billion people. So they were exporting a lot of high value, awesome, amazing products. Okay.
Quality
Audis, quality stuff, man. Chainsaws and all. They had these group of companies called the Mittelstand, and they would all the owners of these companies would get together, and they would work together to solve problems together as a team. Okay. And so Audi had, and Mercedes and BMW, they created that super efficient diesel engine, the fluid and that technology together. All of them have it. Right. And so even though, because it was whatever they had to put into it, they worked on it together like a team. The lighting controls industry needs to adopt a paradigm like that. That the market is so huge, guys, that if we just get together and figure out how to fix this user experience that Webster's talking about on that lighting controls podcast, and the reason why Michael Colligan hates lighting controls and never wants to talk about lighting controls because it's always a pain in the ass or whatever, right?
Right.
And, so yes, you got what you're doing with the council and with this other association of lighting controls technicians or whatever you said they're called.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, like it's just, we're all going to get together and go to the same party.
Right. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
and it's because we're all so passionate. We're all so dedicated to this that it's not about like monetizing and competing with each other. It's really we're all wanting what's better for this industry, so let's actually do this. Let's make it happen. And so I mean, a number of people liken it to like the Council of Elrond, where we get everybody together and be like, okay, we've got a problem, let's fix it, like figure this out. I wouldn't say we need to like dedicate one person to throw themselves into a volcano, but at the same time, we definitely need to fix this problem because lighting controls can offer so much. That's what's at stake, is that energy efficiency, which we've already seen LEDs succeed. We need lighting controls to succeed where LEDs have succeeded. And right now we are behind the 8 ball because we, not through our own choices, but through choices of other people and salesmanship and just trying to get a quick
training,
lack of training, lack of education, lack of awareness. There's so much that we could be doing to get out from behind the 8 ball and really get this in a good place, because if done right, lighting controls really has the ability to provide so much for our world and for carbon footprint reduction, energy conservation, emissions reduction, like all of that. It really is a great resource when done right. And so the sooner we can actually create actionable work, the sooner we can standardize education and terminology, the better we're going to be.
So we're checking a lot of boxes here.
Yeah.
Right. So, like you're talking about, everyone's going to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
Customers are going to have a better experience.
Yep.
We're going to contribute make amazing a contribution to the electrification drive and the further energy efficiency drive. And we know that likely the government's going to start incentivizing this in some way, or doing something, or penalizing those that don't. Whatever, the carrot, the stick. Right. You're going to see all sorts of different policies coming out, and whether you like them or not, it makes no difference. Like, you're not in charge, right? We get to vote in the election, but after that, we have to live in the world we have, and so if you guys can put together, I mean, it doesn't, not tomorrow, obviously, a couple years or whatever. If you guys if you can start solving some of these problems as a council, you guys will make an amazing impact on the world.
Absolutely, and that is the goal. I mean, we really just want things to be better in the end. I mean, yeah, all of the check boxes that you listed out, absolutely would love to be, monetizing off of this, but that is not the goal. The goal is just acceptance of lighting controls as a
but you have to take off your door cat and remember that a lot of your listeners are really interested in selling lighting control systems to satisfied customers and making a commission or earning profit. You know what I'm saying? So we have to check that financial, but we have to let them know that getting together is in everyone's best financial interest. The market is 99% unfulfilled. Okay, guys?
Yeah.
It's 99% unfulfilled.
We have data showing that there's so little penetration when it comes to networked lighting controls in any area that it's depressing. It's like if you had the best car and you built the best car out there and you knew it was the best car, but there was so bad marketing about that car that nobody really wanted to buy it, and the only people who bought it because there was some kind of incentive motivating them to buy it. You would feel pretty bad about that. And it has nothing to do with the actual quality of the product. It has everything to do with what's surrounding that product, who's talking about it, what they're saying about it.
Yes, and Art, here's my next question to you, because you're so depressed. Okay. Okay?
Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day, buddy.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Like, you guys are on such an amazing path right now. You can also look at it positively. Yes, people like Michael Colligan don't like lighting controls, but I grudgingly do them, here and there, and things are getting better. And I think we could make them a magnitude better with the work you guys are doing and the path you're on. You just have to allow the process to come together. You're in a movement. Right. If you can get to the movement stage, lighting controls, I always tell you, had that the boom bust cycle of lighting controls that I've seen in my career. I told you about that. First it was, relays and low voltage wire. Then it was connected all with Cat 5, 6 cable, whatever. And now we're on the third boom bust cycle. You guys, you're trying to stop the bust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that. This is the way to do that.
Right.
What you guys are doing. But could you put your foot on the accelerator a little bit? I don't know. You have to feel it out. It's an art too, right? You don't have to. If you push too hard, it might not work.
Well, just like with podcasting. I mean, you can't go in with an agenda. You can't script a good podcast. You just kind of need to feel it out. I mean, some of the best conversations happen because when I usually have my guests introduce themselves, and when they say something about themselves, I just run with that little element there. And that created the best episode we've heard. And so it has nothing to do with, forcing an agenda, forcing a script, forcing an idea. I would say the episodes that have the list of things that people want to cover are kind of bland in my opinion, because there's no energy, there's no interest, there's no drive to that conversation. It's not, this is new information. It's just regurgitation. And so I would say that it's similar to that. This movement that Ron and I are trying to motivate, to grow, is not just the two of us doing the work. It is everybody doing the work. and trying to make it happen. And we're just help seeding the energy and motivating those questions and those thoughts. But as a podcaster, we're not actually like doing a whole lot. We're just sitting there saying, oh, interesting. What about this? And then the person continues. You know, sometimes we liken some guests where they're kind of like a playback machine where we just tap it and then suddenly all of this information spills out of them, and then we're, you know, over an hour in an episode and we're like, oh, we need to end. And we've said hardly anything throughout the entire episode. And sometimes we need to work a little harder to get information out of people. But, you know, a lot of our job is really just sitting there listening and asking questions. It really, you know, it's about maneuvering through, and in art, like you said, there's very little science to what we do as podcasters.
Have you guys considered, and then this is my last question for you before I give you your leave, my friend. Have you guys considered talking more, or do you talk a lot about the sales process a lot? Does that come up on the show?
So we don't talk a whole lot about our own sales process. We get guests on the show who talk about being like a sales rep or a distributor or something to that effect. But, you know, I think from the point of where we're standing, our perspective certainly helps frame the questions we ask. But we try not to speak too much to our own personal experiences, except for in what we refer to as shorties, which are like episodes that are about 15, 20 minutes long, where it's just Ron and I chatting. We've also done lighting controls on Lighthead, where that had a much more distributor-focused audience, where we did speak a little bit more about the sales process. How do you drive sales? What do you do when you don't have enough information? Stuff like that. But, you know, it is certainly a topic that is worth continuing to talk about on the show, because sales are really the core element of how lighting controls end up on projects. Is you need to have a sales process. You need to sell the product, and sales reps are an integral part, especially in commercial specification lighting controls, because they are sometimes the core designer to a lighting control system.
So there's multiple channels, I guess. You got the specification sale, you got the existing building sale, you got the retrofit, you got there's a lot to unpack, my friend.
Absolutely.
Webster, thank you for being a guest on the How to Start a Podcast.
Thank you for having me on. No, I'm really excited, and I think, you know, the more we can educate people on how to do podcasts, the more good content can come out of that. So I'm super excited to see what happens as a result of this series.
Yeah, and I love the way our conversation kind of weaved its way through both topics, specifically to what you were doing and then back into the actual art of podcasting and what goes on. So thank you very much for giving me your time.
You bet. Thanks, Michael.
Let's Get This Podcast Started is a production of Get a Grip Studios. Do you want to start a podcast? Do you need help with your existing podcast? Do you want to record some conversations or a presentation? Do you want to be a guest on Let's Get This Podcast Started? Go to getagripstudios.com.